Hey Dave, so I've been watching your program since about like early time in high school. Now I'm in college, so it's been a while, but one thing that I really liked, something that you talked about here was the difference between diversity of thought and diversity of identity.
Sure.
Now the thing with a diversity of thought is I feel like that's a problem you actually perpetuate on your show, because the only time you really have left-wing guests are when they're members of the intellectual dark web, such as Harris or Weinstein, and they're only there for the bulk of the time to talk about the regressive left. And so I pretty much wanted to ask you, why won't you have Sam Cedar on?
Yeah, he's recording it too. Okay. Yeah, I mean, the guy's he's just a dishonest player who's just lied about me repeatedly. Like, I'm not going to do it.
So would you be willing to have Natalie Wynn of ContraPoints or David Pakman or Kyle Kalinske? All of these are progressives who have...
I'm not, in principle, I'm not against having any of them, but I'm not going to have people that attack me personally. I think it's pretty obvious if you watch what I did up here. Like, I don't attack people personally. I'm happy to talk about ideas. You're going to go after me personally if you're going to lie about me and slander me and things like that. Like, it's just not the game I'm playing. There's no win in it for me. You know, I have a certain set of rules when it comes to talking to people and how I sort of behave as a public person. And if you don't have rules, like, I'm just not that interested. But also, I think your premise is actually wrong. If you were to look, and someone did break this down on Facebook, I don't know how many shows I've done, maybe 500 interviews, something like that. Most of my guests actually either were lefties or are lefties to some extent. So it's like, you can say, well, Harris and Brett Weinstein, who considers himself deeply progressive, who was a professor at Evergreen State, the most lefty college in the United States. You could say, well, he's not a progressive anymore. Well, if he's not a progressive anymore, it's not because he moved, actually. It's because the left went bananas. So telling me, so Eric Weinstein, who voted for Bernie Sanders, you can't tell me he's not a progressive. My guest 2 weeks ago, Nick Christakis, he considers himself a liberal. He's an old school liberal. So I think I don't know if there's a show that has a sort of wider net. I've actually never seen it, but as long as someone's respectful, I'm more than happy to talk to them.
I'm sure that Sam Cedar will be more than willing to have a respectful discussion, but my point was not to discredit the progressiveness of either of them. I just wanted to say that I think you should have more people on the left that you would consider to be a part of the regressive left on your show. That's all.
Okay.
Hi Dave, I'm Nicky Stallard, and I'm the California spokesperson for the Pink Pistols. So I'm a trans woman armed self-defense. Normally I'm on Second Amendment issues, but I'm very concerned about the suppression of First Amendment by the left. And I deal with a lot of firearms groups, a lot of guys on the so-called far right, and they accept me. And my concern is, you're dealing with a lot of your former progressives and stuff, and they seem to be very arrogant and actually, in my view, very ignorant. And I think that they're potentially stoking serious violence in this country. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we're not going to disagree on this one. First off, the fact that you happen to be a trans woman and that you're protecting yourself using your Second Amendment rights, I think is fantastic. I think that everyone should have equal rights. And that goes without saying. Yes, I am the reason I talk about this so much, the reason I talk about the danger of identity politics and the idea that we will judge people as groups is that it is actually the reverse of the very fabric that the United States was founded upon. What have we done in the United States that's better than anyone else? We created a melting pot here. You could come from anywhere in the world, you could bring your traditions, but it wasn't that you could bring your traditions so that you could just be siphoned off and never assimilate into the wider group and be respectful of the laws and the civic responsibilities and duties and all of the things that this country was founded on. The idea was you can bring your traditions here and that you melt in, and that then creates, it creates a diverse society in the diversity that I don't really care about, that you happen to be trans and that someone else might happen to be black is completely irrelevant to me. But what they're doing by putting such an absolute, never-ending emphasis on identity, on immutable identity, is actually the reverse of what America was founded on. So I think it's very dangerous, and I think it goes to what I said earlier. It goes to why is it that Candace is so dangerous to them? Because to just show that, oh, you could be black and not Democrat, that's actually dangerous. You could be trans and not Democrat. Wow, that's pretty out there. But more power to you for doing it. And I'll keep fighting these ideas, and I hope you will too. It's good to know somebody with a gun, so yes, I will take your card. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question on how do you see, how does limited government play a role in the 21st century? What does it look like to you? And how does the free market combat the censorship of tech giants?
Yeah, so that's sort of where we started tonight. So this is the hardest one right now, I think. If you're liberty-minded, if you believe basically in the free market, and you think free market capitalism is the best chance for the most people to be free and for the most people to prosper and all those things, the situation we're in right now in the tech companies is the hardest one. So my position still at the moment is I do not want the government coming in and telling these tech companies what to do. I don't know how many of you are paying taxes yet, but I live in California, I live in LA, and I pay my property taxes on a California state website. It looks like Prodigy from 1993. Like the idea that the government is gonna come in and government, I mean really, you have to really think about it. Government regulators are gonna come in and they're gonna break up these tech companies. I mean, government regulators, if you ever, think about it in your life, if you really had a problem, and I'm not talking about if there was a terrorist attack, but any real problem that you might have, do you think the government is the right answer, or is it that your friends and your family and your community and things like that, or your local government? I'm big on local government. So I would say this one with the tech companies this has pushed my libertarian side basically as far as it can go, because I'm actually not sure what the answer is.
Okay.
And even out of the people in my crew, so Eric Weinstein, for example, is more okay. He's more on the left. He's okay with the government getting involved right now. Now the irony of that is he doesn't like Trump. He's described Trump as an existential threat. So now you have people on the left sort of saying, well, let's give more power to the government to deal with the tech things. I'm not quite there. Look, Dennis Prager, he's a free market guy, but he also was suing YouTube over restricted videos. I mean, this is one of those things where they control so much information, they have so much power to control the way you live, that perhaps this is the right move for government. And the counter argument for that, of course, is that every time you give government power, government will find another reason to take more power, and it never cedes that power back. So, look, I personally would rather err on the side of competition, but could they shut me down tomorrow and then it would be impossible for me to find all you guys and all that? They could, so there's a huge risk there. I don't know that there's a totally airtight case either way.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Michael Tai. I recently won my first election to the Milpitas School Board. Count 20 minutes over, but I'm speaking as myself.
Okay.
So I'm glad to hear that you're big on local government. I'm finding though that even in local government, the first thing that they're doing is that they're trying to restrict what I'm able to say. Like they have all these lawyers coming in saying you can't say this, you can't say that, you're going to get sued. And my concern is how do you keep promoting an atmosphere of free speech and free ideas without getting blackballed? And
I mean, this is a tough one. Well, first off, can you give me an example of the type of thing that you've been trying to say that they're telling you not to say?
Well, I actually like to learn from what other people do. So previously, someone on our school board invited Betsy DeVos over to visit Milpitas schools, and that resulted in massive protests, and people started writing angry letters demanding answers, demanding who on the school board invited them so we can destroy them in the next.
Who on the school board invited the head of the Department of Education to come and talk? I mean, I really think this is how crazy it is. I mean, Betsy DeVos, but this is exactly what I was talking about this idea that you pin everybody as a Nazi and all of these things. It's like Betsy DeVos, you may have policy differences with Betsy DeVos. She's more for school choice, you may not be more for school choice, I'm for school choice. Betsy DeVos basically dismantled Title IX, which was the most disastrous overreach of the government that pretty much got rid of due process and allowed, for all of these cases related to sexual assaults on campus, where in the past that would have to go through the government, go through law enforcement, through proper channels. They were basically creating these clown courts on college campuses and removing due process, and then banning kids from schools and ruining people's lives and all of these things. She dismantled that. So, whether she did that or not, or whether you like that or not, the idea that the head of the Department of Education shouldn't be able to come to speak at a school or a local community board or something like that is actually crazy. So your question really gets to the heart of all of this, which is how do you fight this? And I think the only way to fight it is that everyone must start getting a little bit braver. I don't think I'm that brave. I don't know what's wrong with me that I keep talking about these things, but all of this crew of people that you guys have become familiar with, all we're doing is, I think, saying some pretty basically obvious things and having these conversations respectfully. It goes to the earlier question. It's like, if you're going to attack me all day and attack my character and all those things, then I don't have any need to do that with you. You could do it. I'm not trying to get anyone booted off these platforms. But I think the best thing you can do is relentlessly stand up for the things that you believe in. And guess what? If you start doing it, he might start doing it, and then she might start doing it, and then more people might start doing it. But for the 20 people that seem to be doing this publicly right now, it's like, that's a lot of pressure on people, And it's like, we just need more of you guys. That really is it. And you know what? If they destroy you, and then, first off, most people get to the other side. All of the people that I've seen them try to destroy, look, in Canada, when Peterson talked about Bill C-17, the trans pronoun bill, they tried to destroy him. He's bigger than ever. Lori, what's her name? Wilfrid Laurier, Lindsay Shepherd, who showed a Ben Shapiro video on campus, and then they tried to bring her in for hate speech. She's bigger than ever. Even James Damore, he got fired from Google, but guess what? He's still got a job and he's doing okay. They actually, their bark is bigger than their bite, and if you stand up for yourself, well, I just don't know how you live if you don't stand up for yourself. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but that's what I would say. You must stand up for yourself. I don't know what other thing there is to be human. You gotta stand up for yourself.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Hi, Mr. Rubin.
Hi.
I'm probably, looking back, going to ask the most boring question of the night, but I have a very keen interest in going into politics of some variety, and probably not in America because I'm only on a visa here, but I'm really interested in following that kind of libertarian trend and that, classical liberal, paleo-libertarian area, and that whole thing in the world of politics and the media and that section. What would you, because you're very successful in this, what would you give as advice for achieving there and maybe advancing your career and advancing your prospects? What would you say?
I mean, I'll give you the same advice I give everyone that tells me they want to get on YouTube, which is just get on there and start doing it. Get yourself out there. Open a YouTube channel, get on Twitter. A lot of it's miserable, and a lot of it you will put up videos and 2 people will watch, and it's going to be your parents. But you just keep going and going and going. If you have something original in your mind, if there is something truly original, if there is something about you that is engaging and authentic and honest, and if your ideas are good, people will eventually start finding you. You will do some video that someone will tweet at you when it has 200 views and go, this guy's on it. He's got some of the right ideas. Where are you from?
I'm from Ireland.
You're from Ireland, okay. Look, you can do it in Ireland. It can be done. I just had a great time in Ireland and drank a lot. But if you start doing it, and you're doing something good, if you build it, they will come. I'm a firm believer in that, and I know it sort of sounds cliche, and you want some magic bullet, you want me to tell you something that's gonna set you off forever. It doesn't exist, but know your ideas, I would say. Know your ideas. You don't have to know everyone wants to get everybody on everything these days. So if you don't have a thought on every freaking policy that there is, they want to get you on something. Or, this guy that the first question in reference, it's like, this guy just wants to get me on something. It's like, no, I want to talk about ideas. Know what your ideas are. And if you are honest about them and you are a decent human being, other people will find that. Because to the previous question, there aren't a lot of brave people out there, so why not be someone that's brave?
Well, kind of on that note, I'd like to really shamelessly plug my Instagram page.
Oh, he's good. He's good. What is it?
It's at Shamrock Patriot. It's really good. It's all about my life as a foreigner in America.
All right, you know what? I'm going to follow you, Shamrock Patriot. Shamrock Patriot. This better not just be pictures of your dog. Let's see. Oh, there you are. Oh, and it's a 4-leaf clover with an American flag. Isn't that nice?
Hi Dave, how are you doing?
You, sir, I believe we've chatted before.
We've met.
Yes.
It's the Abu thing.
Yes, yes.
So we're talking today about identity and One of them is, of course, political identity.
Sure.
I'm going to reference your very hard to read disagreement with Quillette last week on Twitter. But in all seriousness, what do you feel? Do these titles and words like libertarian and liberal and where are they going? What is the new, I guess, lexicon?
Yeah, this is a great question. So for those of you that aren't sure of the article, but he's referencing Quillette, which is actually a really fantastic, for the most part, site that's run by Clara, who's been on my show. It's out of Australia. They have a great bunch of heterodox thinkers and writers. Just before I got on stage here, I retweeted Jonathan Kay, who's one of their editors, so I wasn't happy with them with this one particular article. The particular point of this article was that if the intellectual dark web wants to be truly diverse, then we can't talk to, in effect they were saying we can't talk to people on the right because at this point we agree with them on too much and we have to reach out to more people on the left. I just find that to be a faulty premise because I have all sorts of disagreements with Shapiro when it comes to gay marriage or abortion or death penalty or a series of other things, and I find conservatives, look what's happening here, I find conservatives always willing to talk about these ideas. But to answer your question specifically, I would say these labels are becoming increasingly meaningless. The idea that somebody's a classical liberal or a libertarian, that means just on the margin of something. A classical liberal would say there's a use, a little more utility for the state. Where a libertarian, it just depends how far you want to go down that situation until we're all in Mad Max. And intellectually, I love that intellectually, I really do. Like thinking, how could we actually disassemble the entire thing? Like it's a funny intellectual exercise to me, but I don't think it's the most realistic, real world, tangible exercise. So I would say that the definitions of, look, what do I say all the time now? Defending my liberal principles of free speech and believing in the individual, they've become conservative positions. So to say, so for me, to say, look, by that extension, I suppose I'm a conservative at some level because I'm trying to conserve liberalism. So a lot of the words don't matter. I would say the dividing line right now is you basically believe in the individual, you believe in limited government, and that it's your life. Go do whatever you want with your life, and I can't have your shit, and you can't have my shit. Or you believe that there should be some sort of central planning, and this is what's so unfortunate about what's happened with the left, is that if you look at all the Democratic candidates right now, every answer is a federal government answer. There is nothing about kicking anything back to the states, and the fact that we have these states that were an experiment, it's the greatest experiment ever. The idea that, okay, Colorado right now has legalized recreational weed, we have it here in California too. If you like that, you can be there, and guess what, it's helped the economy, and there's medical reasons why it's good, and all sorts of things. But if you're really against weed, then move to Mississippi. If you know, like there's all, if you want high taxes because you think it's gonna help education, even though it really doesn't, move to California. But if you want low taxes, move to Florida. I mean, there's a million things that are beautiful because you have the free vote. You have the ability to move around in this country and find a place that is for you, which is exactly why I'm not for forcing the baker to bake the gay marriage cake, because you can get a cake elsewhere. It sucks to say, but I believe in personal freedom more than anything else. So I would say you're either basically for freedom, and that's going to be weird because sometimes people are going to say things you don't like, your neighbor maybe flying a flag you don't like, or playing music too loud, or you're for strong federal control of everything. And to me, that is the road to tyranny. So I would say that's the dividing line. The dividing line of whether someone's a classical liberal or a libertarian or a conservative, maybe has a little more of a religious perspective on things, I think those things are becoming increasingly meaningless, and that's why I'm very enthused, actually, despite the fact that things seem so crazy these days.
Thank you so much, and
thank you.
Take care.
Yeah, good to see you again.
Hey Dave, thanks for coming. I'm Daniel, and I'm a senior here at Santa Clara. And I just want to ask you a question to get you a better idea of your perspective on privilege, white privilege and racism.
Sure.
So, I mean, we could probably all agree that today in the United States things have gotten better, let's say, in terms of racism going down, but my understanding is...
Well, but that, we shouldn't understate that. I mean, it has gotten immeasurably better. We are the least racist nation in the history of the world, probably. There are no racist laws in this country. Everyone has every opportunity to do everything they want. There is no racism built into the system. That doesn't mean that individual people don't have individual problems and people come from different things, but it's not just that we've gotten a little bit better. We've gotten seriously better in a way that most other countries couldn't even fathom.
Yeah, so I agree that that is true in a lot of ways. One thing I want to understand from your perspective is that if you were to take the average white person or the average black person, it's fair to say black people experience racism to a greater degree than white people in the United States. And how do you calculate that and understand, well, there's some sort of privilege because of that, or how do you reconcile that idea or not?
Well, all sorts of people from all sorts of life experiences experience different things. So if you're a very fat person, you're going to experience life differently than someone that's really in shape. If someone moves here from China and only speaks Chinese, as a first-generation immigrant, their life is going to be really hard, most likely, and they're going to have to do a lot of menial jobs with the hope that the next generation will speak more English, will be able to have better education, all of these things, and then, let's say, move into the middle class. This is what has consistently happened in the United States in a way that it has not happened anywhere else. So there's two parts here. Part one, are there racists? Yes. Do racists exist? Yes. Do homophobes exist? Do transphobes exist? There are bad people out there. There absolutely are. The only thing, in my estimation, that a society can do is make sure that the laws for everyone are exactly equal. That's it. The idea, think about it, I know nothing about you, I have no idea where you came from. The idea that just because you are white, that means you are somehow privileged. I have no idea for all I know, you're here on financial assistance, and you could have come from one parent household. It doesn't matter. But the idea that somebody would look at you and be like, well, he's white, so we should take from him and we should give to somebody else, is actually, it's the reverse of what the American dream is supposed to be. So all you can do is make equal laws for everybody. That's it. The second you say, okay, well, these people should get more based on their skin color, or these people should get preferential treatment at a job because of their sexuality or their gender, well, that all sounds nice, except what are you in effect doing? You're saying we're being prejudicial to people based on their sexuality and based on their gender and their skin color and all of those things. So it's not a perfect situation, because I'm not saying that racism did not exist. I mean, I fully acknowledge slavery was real. There are racists still in this country today. But we also had a black president that was voted for by more, the biggest popular vote, I think, ever, maybe second to Reagan's second election or something like that. So we've done more. And I think we should be aware of that. And if you deeply care about this type of issue, do more in your community to help solve it. But it's not about, oh, let's take from somebody and give it to somebody else.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Rubin.
Yeah.
My name is Brad Mothel. I have one question and one jab. I'll mention the jab at the end. I assume you want to maintain...
You want to do the jab up top?
You've only attracted one woman tonight.
What?
You've only attracted two women tonight to be in line.
I've only attracted 2 women tonight? Oh, well, any woman is allowed to come up to the mic. I mean, oh, that's the jab? Well, I don't know, you're being sarcastic?
No, I'm just... take it the way you want to. You're coming on it, thank you. I don't know, maybe I don't know, I just want to mention that to you.
Oh, all right.
I don't use social correctness much in public. I sure do not.
Oh, gotcha.
I just want to make, that would be a funny comment. So, I assume you want to maintain Republican control of the White House 2020. I assert that both Trump and Biden realize this is a critical state to winning. You do have a ongoing campus, what do you call it, projection around America, am I correct? You go to college campuses frequently in America?
Yeah.
Okay. I also assert that 4 of the 6 suburbs of Philly is critical to winning that state. That's where the battle's going to be. I believe that Biden did kicked his campaign off in Pennsylvania. I have to verify that. Are you going to recload your college road show out to Pennsylvania to influence this? That's my question.
Well, all right. Well, there were a couple of premises in there that aren't exactly true, but all right. So first off, well, I just spoke in Philly last week, actually. I spoke at Yalcon, so it's a libertarian group in Philadelphia, but they are all about related to liberty and human freedom and individualism and those things. I would say the question basically, I think, was, do I want continued Republican presence in the White House?
You made that assumption. If that's not correct, I would draw my question then.
Well, I would say if the Democrats came up with an old school liberal, if JFK was reincarnated, if there was a guy, I mean really, if JFK was reincarnated, if there was someone that could go out there and say, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country, or if there was a Democrat that could go out there and say, I envision a world where people will not be where my children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, I would love to vote for that person. That person doesn't exist in the Democratic Party. I mean, and that, really, if you really think about it, I mean, the truth is that those two messages, ask not what you can do for your country, ask what your country can do for you, and that you don't want your children judged on the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Those are the reverse. Those are a 180 reverse of the messages that the Democrats are putting out right now. They're saying, what can the government give you? We want free college, we want free healthcare, we want free all these things, which of course are not free, everyone knows that. But it's not just that, it's also that they are trying to institutionalize all of these judgments based on the immutable characteristics. So believe me, if there was I would love, my dream would be that a great Democratic candidate would come up and a great Republican candidate would come up and they could argue on the margins of what government should do here and there, and that would be it. At the moment, if my choice is between Trump and one of the people that the Democrats are putting out there, then yeah, I would say that I would prefer the Trump. Yeah.
Can you answer my question then, please? I did not mind the promotion of libertarianism, but not at all.
Yeah.
Anyway, but are you going to have any type of attempt to effectuate that happening next year? For example, going to any colleges in the PA.
Oh yeah, I mean, I go where I'm invited, and I can do it. I'm happy to go. I don't discriminate based on state. If they invite me there, as I said, I was just in Philly. I'd be happy to go back, and I'll keep doing. You know, my show crosses borders. So the hope is that if we can talk about these ideas, that someone in Jersey might like them, and somebody in New Mexico might hate them. But
I'll make my question more pointed. Are you going to help Trump win Pennsylvania? Yes or no?
Am I going to? No. I mean, I'm not a political operative, I would say. I care about ideas. So help him? I mean, yeah, I don't, yeah. How do you all feel about that answer? Hello.
Hello, Dave Rubin. I'm a huge fan, and
Thank you.
As a gay conservative, it's very strange when people call you homophobic. So,
Yes, we're big homophobes. It's very weird.
So, it's kind of a weird question, just because I'm sure you've heard of like the talk about reparations between. It's been not only entertained, but like seriously thought out for many of the Democratic candidates. I think it's kind of weird, the duality of this, because if you even look even closer back in our history, we have the issues of like basic serfdom with the Irish and Asian communities within our country that that built essentially America in the same vein.
Japanese
internment camps and all those different, but they're not extending that to other people that have also been affected that way.
Well, I would say reparations are a terrible idea. The best sort of one-liner that I've heard on this is that yes, reparations would be okay. So if you owned a slave, if you're in this room and you owned a slave or you were a slave, then reparations are okay. But if you didn't or you weren't, then no reparations. The very idea of it, look, again, things happen and then over time things do get better. Now we could argue, why is it that generally speaking, African Americans have it worse economically than say white people or say Indian people or whatever it is. You can have that debate, and I think most of the debate, I would recommend watch my episode with Thomas Sowell. You can talk about all of the policies, usually of the Democrats, that have sort of kept people in this sort of substandard set of living situations, basically. We could have that debate, that's not exactly what you're asking, but I would say that more than anything else, what does it really mean? So what are you going to say? So we're going to give every black person $1,000. Or is that enough? And should we give them $10,000? Should they get $100,000? Because some of their ancestors were slaves? That's not belittling what some of their ancestors were. But I also heard Candace make a really funny line on this, which is that the left will tell you that they don't want voter ID laws because apparently minorities can't get IDs, and yet at the same time they're going to want them to be able to prove that they come from slaves. So it's all sort of bananas. I would say the past is in the past and we have to move forward. And the only way you can move forward is make sure the laws are equal for everyone. And if you again, we would go to the other question, which is if this is something that you care about, like if you care about what you, let's say a perceived injustice with the black community or something, then you can volunteer. There are all sorts of things that you can do to help people if you want to help them. But just the idea of we're just going to keep handing out money to people for things that happened in the past, I just think it's a bad idea. And it doesn't end. It's not like you're gonna have a set of reparations and then everyone's gonna be like, all right, we're good to go. You know, it's like, then it's like, well, what comes after that and what comes after that?
Yeah, well, it wasn't really like pro reparations, but I think it's a terrible idea as well because it never ends. It's like, oh, we need to keep writing bigger checks. It was more the fact that the Democrats and even the left are getting further and further anti-intellectual and also just fact-based because they pick and choose like, oh, you know, we really need this margin and we need this vote, so we're going to create policies that specifically target this demographic rather than trying to actually create positive
this gets to sort of the essence of intersectionality, which is sort of what everything that they're doing is based on, which is if we can take all of these oppressed groups, although they're not really oppressed groups, if we can take all of these perceived oppressed groups, if we can somehow link gays and Muslims and transgender people and all of these people together, and anyone that's and Latino people, anyone that's not white or whatever it is, that somehow that combined will somehow be a very powerful voting bloc. We can get all these people to think the same things. And actually, it's the most insulting and actually destabilizing way of running a country, because now you have all of these people that think that their perceived victimhood, whatever it might be, they think it's virtue. So they always need to be the most virtuous. That's why there's that crazy moment when Bernie Sanders was speaking at the Black Lives no, it wasn't at a Black Lives Matter rally. He was just speaking at a campaign rally, and the Black Lives Matter people just grabbed the mic from him, and he refused to take it back because he knew in the intersectionality score he would be crushed. They were going to try to let him speak at the Women's March, and then they said, no, you can't speak, you're a man. And it's like, what? This is the guy who stood up for every lefty principle ever, whether I agree with him or not. And there's a series of examples of this. So I don't think it's something that's sustainable, really. And I do think that this other thing that's happening, let's say on the center right, is much more rich in terms of ideas and interesting.
All right, well, thank you for your time, and I appreciate you coming here.
Hey Dave, thanks again for coming. Speaking of intersectionality, my question for you was, I had a professor tell me one time that I can't use logic and rationale to judge other cultures because it's assimilated to whiteness culture because it originated in Western Europe. So these types of people that are using this type of Foucaultian rhetoric, how would you reply to that and actually attempt to have a genuine dialogue back and forth?
I mean, this postmodernist way of thinking is so profoundly disruptive. Is this a professor at this school?
It's a religious studies professor, yes.
At this university?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is deeply, deeply dangerous. The idea that history is automatically evil because somebody won or somebody lost, or that we should be shredding all of these things. I mean, this is why I'm completely against taking all these monuments down. You know, there's a set of people that want to sort of erase history. Now, I've acknowledged it several times here. We have a messy history in this country. But you know what they did? I was there only about 2 years ago. I was in Old Town Alexandria, which was George Washington's church, and at one time it was also Robert E. Lee's church. So some of the people were upset at the fact that Robert E. Lee had a tiny little plaque at the church. So they took the plaque down, but then they said, well, that's not enough because George Washington owned slaves. So then they took George Washington's plaque down as well at his church. And this is something that will just keep moving. This postmodern ideology will keep, it's a movement of destruction, not of creation. And it's very easy to destroy things. It's very hard to build things. And this is what they will do. As I said before, Barack Obama ran for president against gay marriage. So now let's flash forward 20, 30 years. What's going to happen? If the postmodernists have really won the debate and all the conservatives have been silenced and you guys are all kicked off the platforms and all of those other things and all of these ideas are silenced and you're all thought of as Nazis and all of these things, well then guess what? One day they will quite literally come to knock down the Barack Obama Library in Chicago because he ran the first time against gay marriage. That's how dangerous this thing is. So we can't erase history in the name of tolerance. What you could do is, if there's a statue that you don't like, you could put up, I would say you could put up a counter monument. You can, I mean, to answer your question though, because I'm going on a little tangent here, stand up to your professor. Stand up now. That's it. Is he going to, look, if he's going to give you a bad grade because you stood up and intellectually challenged him, he's a bad professor. I mean, he sounds like he's a pretty bad professor anyway. But if you do that, you know what? Put your iPhone next to you on your desk while you're doing it, and then you tweet it at me, and we get it out there, and then something changes. Something changes. You guys have more power than you can possibly imagine. That really is the truth. Nobody had this power 20 years ago. But if you know what your ideas are and you can battle him about postmodernism with the incisive nature, let's say that Jordan Peterson would, maybe you can't do it at that level, but like something close, guess what? Get that video out there, and then hopefully, if Santa Clara is a decent university, hopefully the head of the religious studies department will crack down on him. And if they don't, and then they believe it, let's say, well, then what are you doing here actually? Are you here to be brainwashed? And if you're here to be brainwashed, then keep doing it. But if you're not here to be brainwashed, then you may as well stand up for yourself now.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. It means the world to me and so many other students here, knowing that people like you that actually have a public platform are willing to stand up for us.
Cool, well, stand up too. Stand up too so I can retire. I wanted to be in the NBA. I don't know what I'm doing here.
How you doing, Dave?
Hi.
My name is Richard. I'm in the school's stand-up comedy club. Not very good, but still part of the club. But just, I wanted to ask you.
How's it going? Is it as bad? What a life, man. What are you doing?
I know, right? No, but just, I just think I just want to ask you as like a fellow comedian. I feel like as comedians, what we enjoy most things, one of the great, beautiful things about comedy is that it exposes raw truths from not only your own perspective, but other people's different, various perspectives. But we had someone in our club who holds a board position say we're not going to tolerate any jokes against the LGBT community.
Yeah, it's bullshit.
Yeah. I'm not here to advocate saying we should make fun, but
I'll advocate for that. You're allowed to make fun of gay people, by the way, because they're equal. You know what I mean? But that's the truth. Don Rickles, who was one of the greatest stand-up comics of all time, what did he used to do? He used to go out in the crowd, oh, there's an Asian guy, there's a gay guy, there's a Jew, there's a Muslim, there's a black guy. And guess what it did? It made everyone feel equal. So what they're doing to comedy is so disgusting, actually. So I'll give you two quick examples on this. So where's my friend who referred to himself as Apu before? So Apu in The Simpsons, right? Apu. They said they're not putting Apu in The Simpsons anymore. That still stands, right? There was a documentary about it and all of this stuff. Apu was the hardest working guy in The Simpsons, who they did episodes where Homer at the beginning of the episode, remember who needs the Quickie Mart? Homer was against immigration, and then because of Apu, he comes around on immigration. He had a Hindu wedding. He has his Indian family there. They traveled to India. All of these things. They did episodes on veganism and all of this stuff. And Apu is a friend and he's accepted in the community. And then what do the intersectionalists say? They say he's brown and he has an accent, so we better not put him in the show anymore. So either they're not putting him in anymore or they just sort of let it go after a little backlash. But even worse than that is, did you see this? A couple months ago, Family Guy said that they're not going to do any more gay jokes. Now, they've done gay jokes for 20 some odd years. Every joke about Stewie is that he's a gay baby. That's the whole show, right? And what did they say? So Seth MacFarlane, I would love to interview the guy and I respect him in a lot of ways, but he's become, in my estimation, he's a good liberal who has been just sort of, his brain has been taken over by leftism. And I would say a lot of comics like Sarah Silverman and Patton Oswalt and this whole crew, this is what's sort of happened with these guys. So Seth MacFarlane, for 20 years he makes fun of gay people. And now, because he's a social justice warrior and he's made hundreds of millions of dollars on it, well, we're not going to make fun of gay people anymore. But what are you actually saying? So are you going to still make fun of black people? Are you going to still make fun of Asian people? Are you going to still make... And it's like, well, what are you actually doing? You think you're doing something in the name of tolerance, but you're actually othering these people. I mean, I was never that into gay culture in any way, but one thing that strikes me as very sad about gay culture now is that it used to create an incredible amount of art and culture and dance and music and comedy and all these things because they were the other. They were the other. And now it's become so stiff with political correctness that there's nothing interesting about gay culture to me. There's absolutely nothing interesting about it. Now maybe that's a function of equality, which is a sort of beautiful thing in a weird way, and that just shows you that the more sort of equal we all get, well then we start putting some of these things aside and then maybe we have to recalibrate and figure out other ways to be creative. But yeah, a little oppression and a little political incorrectness goes a long way in comedy.
My question was just not you did mention in terms of people being equal, but I just wanted, my question was in terms of the art of comedy? How do you think like the dangers of like, you know, saying like what we can't say? Like,
well, it's weird. So I did, for those of you who don't know, I did stand up in New York for about 12 years, and then when I moved to LA and I went on the Young Turks, I just basically stopped, and then I started again about a year ago, and I'm selling out all these comedy clubs now, and I just mess around with the crowd, and I give out shirts depending on your impression, and you can yell your impression, and I go, I got a limp, I'm a lesbian with a limp, and okay, you might get a shirt, and you know, whatever it is. And I'm just having fun with everybody in the room. But I will tell you one thing that has changed is that everyone has a phone now, right? So like the guy that took the first question, he had his phone out the whole time because now he's going to send it to that guy, and it's like he wants to get me. And that sort of thing in a comedy club really sucks because in a comedy club, it's the artist's space. You know what I mean? It's like when Picasso was painting, he wasn't doing it in front of a whole group of people and been like, you like that blue stroke? But at a comedy club, that's what you have to do. You have to do it live. So the idea that people can now videotape you, but Joe Rogan and Chris Rock and I think Chappelle and a couple other guys, when they do their specials now, they make people take their phones away. So, you know, all of everything's changed. But if you got something in you to say, and you got some sense of humor in there, do it, man. But Jesus Christ, what the hell are you doing with your life?
Oh, no. I'm like, I said like, I'm not like I dislike doing it.
I'm kidding, man. Yeah. If you want to do it, if you love it, if it's in you, you have to do it. That's life.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, man.
All right. Good luck. Good luck.
How's it going, Dave? I'm Cam. Big fan of the show. My mom loves you as well.
Nice. Hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom. So I just wanted to ask you. Her name's Amy, but it's not.
Hello, Amy.
Amy.
Can she hear us now?
She's gonna freak out. I wanted to ask you a brief question. So I feel like in college, a lot of us are trying to find out who we are, what our voice is, and I actually really like your point about speaking out when you feel like it's right. You know, not just conforming and writing. You know, writing an essay that agrees with your professor, sitting there quietly while your professor says something that's really biased. I guess my question is, what made you think, what led you there? And like someone in my position, I feel the call and I want to speak out because I feel like I can influence people's opinions and I feel like people know I'm talking in good faith, but how do I educate myself to the point where I can do it effectively?
Well, on the education part, I mean, it's funny because there's so many ways you guys can learn. Like, you happen to be in school right now, but you can watch incredible interviews, whether it's my show or Rogan's show or Sam Harris's podcast or a zillion other things where you can learn from world-class thinkers. Like, you want to know about the essence of postmodernism, there are a gajillion Jordan Peterson lectures or on the Bible, right? I mean, there are incredible things you can learn. You want to learn about the nature of consciousness, you can listen to Sam Harris lectures. You want to learn about economics and mathematics, you can listen to Eric Weinstein or his brother if you want to learn about biology. I mean, so learning, I don't think that's the problem here, right? Because you guys have all of access to learn. As far as the other part, like how do you do it? Well, let's say you don't do it. You think you're going to be happier or worse off in a year from now?
Worse off.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the truth. That's just the truth. So it's about what type of life you want to live. And that's why I believe in the individual. Whatever it is that is in you that you want to do, go do it. Go do it. And if you don't do it now, I mean, it sounds like I'm beating a dead horse, but you will never do it. So what led me to do it? Well, I was part of this leftist thing, and then I saw that everyone was afraid to speak. I saw this constant smearing of everybody. And all I started doing at first, I mean, you can go back to my videos 5 years ago, I started doing these videos, walking down the street, holding my camera, going, something's going on here with free speech. It was just at the beginning of the whole thing, and I was like, something seems off about free speech. I'm not worried that the government's coming to get my free speech, but seemingly if you say anything that's politically incorrect these days, a mob is gonna come get you. And I just started talking about it, and then suddenly people started watching my videos, and then I was like, oh, I must be, because I'm saying something true, people are responding to it. And I just believe that. If you say something true, you'll figure it out.
Okay, so main takeaway, listen to your podcast.
Main takeaway is listen to your mother. That's the main takeaway. Listen to your mother.
She's great song measure. Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right, thanks a lot.
Hi, Dave. Thank you for coming to Santa Clara. My question is, what do you make of the narrative that's been formed about this whole intellectual dark web, and that you and other people have been acting as kind of like gateways to radicalization? You know, with the narrative going, they begin with the Joe Rogan podcast, and it's great because he's talking about apes, and Alex Jones is talking about 6, 7, 8 dimensions. they eventually find your show, ... They end up start watching Richard Spencer and, you know, branding some tiki torches.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's so crazy, and it goes to the heart of everything that I'm trying to fight up here. I want you to think for yourself. That's what I want. And I bring on people every week that agree on this or disagree on that. I try to ask them the right questions. I think I usually do. Every now and again, I'm probably going to miss something. That's fine. Nobody's perfect. But the idea that somehow by watching Joe Rogan or watching my show or listening to Sam or any of these things, that we're radicalizing people. I mean, it's actually bananas. You know, there's a guy, I can't remember his name, but Tim Pool tweets about it a lot. There's a guy who did an analysis, because I think what you're referencing is that alternative influencer report that basically put, did you guys see this? They put a whole bunch of our names on a map, and they said, well, Rubin talked to Rogan, and Rogan talked to Rubin, and that guy talked to Peterson, and this guy talked to, and they could somehow link on Milo talked to this guy, and you know, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, they presented that as if it was a scientific study that was proving radicalization. All it proved is that some people have talked to each other. So this guy who's a social scientist went in and actually started tracking some of the trends, and there's actually more evidence that we've de-radicalized people. I get more email actually from, let's say, more far-right conservatives, especially when it comes to the social issues. So gay marriage and abortion, a couple other things, that say to me all the time, they're like, you know, I never heard a liberal that was decent and tolerant of my views, and because of that, I've actually moved a little bit. So I think we've done more actually to moderate people. And I would say this, if we can't hold this thing, this sort of decent center that we're trying to hold, well, everyone will watch the extremes. If you think the left has gone bananas now, I assure you they can go far more bananas, and you'll watch the right go bananas too. So that's why, again, I'm so enthused about what's happening on the right, because I know I can come here. And so, for example, I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to guess that most of you are pro-life. I'm begrudgingly pro-choice, but I know that I can say that, and we can have that debate, and I've had that debate repeatedly with Ben Shapiro, and I just had it with Ali Stuckey, and I know that you're not going to look at me at the end of it and think, oh, I hate babies, and I'm not going to look at you and go, oh, you hate women. So there's a much richer place on the center-right right now for ideas, and hopefully the IDW, whatever it is, you know, we don't have a card. People think we have like a secret clubhouse and a handshake and all that. We did go out for dinner once, but, you know, if we can just keep trying to have conversation in a time when people don't want you to have conversation, I think that in and of itself is good enough.
And a follow-up, if I may.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's any chance within the foreseeable future of a type of kind of modernization of general like leftist ideological positions?
No,
or
there's been no evidence of it. There's been no evidence. I mean, exactly. You could really, like, if you're just bored for an hour, watch my videos from 4 years ago when I was saying, guys, pull back a little bit. If the Trump election didn't wake them up, they double down every time. That's what happens every single time they double down. And they're really just, I would say they're basically on the road to hell at the moment. And it's like, where are the moderate Democrats? They exist somewhere, by the way. There used to be blue dog Democrats who were more moderate. So they were often Democrats in more red states, but they were pro-choice or more for gay rights or things like that. They basically don't exist anymore. JFK, where are the Daniel Patrick Moynihan, Ed Koch? These people used to exist, often in red states, and they don't exist anymore. So I would say the party has basically been hijacked by far-left radicals, and until the liberals stand up and take it back, I don't see how it can work. What I would prefer to do for myself is build bridges here, and that's why I'm here.
And just last thing, we
got to move. We got a lot of.
Okay, all right. Sorry. Well, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much for coming to speak. I really enjoyed it. So I think you're spot on about the fact that the left is very eager to just throw labels at people. And I know that this is something that I'm sure everybody here has experienced before. I know that when I was in 7th grade, I told people that I supported Mitt Romney. I got called a racist by my fellow middle schoolers. And I'll drop a shameless plug.
That's the most depressing thing I've ever heard. I mean, just the idea that you support Mitt Romney, so that makes you a racist, but then another 7th grader would look at you and be like, you're a racist.
Absolutely, and the fact, I mean, that just proves how pervasive it is, and how far down it's leaking into our culture. And I'll drop a shameless plug here, it ties in though rather well. I've got a YouTube channel called The Pendulum, where I go to protests and I interview people. And yesterday I was at a May Day protest, and I and my Korean cameraman got called white supremacists. So I think it's, obviously they're pushing too far, and they're calling people racist and all these other terms when it really doesn't apply. I think for us on the right, we can just kind of shrug it off, but I know there are a lot of people in the center who get scared away by that. So my question is, how do we deal with the fact that
all you got to do is be a little bit better than the left. That's it. They are so hysterical at the moment, and they're purging people. If you guys really believe in the conservative things that I think you believe, all you got to do really is sit there, open up your arms, be willing to have conversations with people, because these lefties, the good lefties, and again, there are good lefties, they are so freaked out by this thing, but they're actually afraid of saying that conservatives might not be all horrible. But if you consistently just show them you're not horrible, and we've moved on certain things, so gay marriage to me is the easiest one, to show, wow, 10 years ago this was the wedge issue for George W. Bush's re-election, anti-gay marriage. It's completely irrelevant now. As far as I can tell, I'm not saying there aren't any Republicans that care about it, but the right modified. It actually came more to the center. And all you have to do is not be as hysterical as what the left is pushing out, and I think you will consistently find good liberals. It's going to take, they have to kind of hint it to you at first, and they're going to kind of look at you like, oh, maybe he's a racist still, and they're going to freak out over the hat and all of those things. But you may want to take off the hat. Take off the hat first. But that's the idea, right? That's the idea, is that if you're just a little bit better than them, and that won't take much, that's not a lot of work to do. Be willing to talk about ideas, and I think you will find that more and more liberals will keep coming around to this.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Dave, thanks for coming. Let's talk about the Overton window for a little bit.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about things like censorship or deplatforming, as well as people like Alex Jones or Milo getting booted off of Facebook. And you've also talked about like name calling by the left. You say anything that's moderately right of center, you're a Nazi, you're a homophobe, you're a racist, and I think a big deal, a big part of your whole shtick, is free speech, right?
Yeah.
But you've also stood up here and you said that people that are like homophobic or racist, you said they were bad. It sounded like objectively bad. And I know you've had conversations on your show. I think it was, I might butcher his name, is Stefan Molyneux.
Yeah.
You talked about things that are seemingly hot button issues like race and IQ.
Yeah.
You had that conversation with him. And I've also seen you on Twitter publicly disavow people that are farther right of you. Like just recently I saw a tweet from you disavowing, I think it was Richard Spencer. So I'm just curious how far you think the concept of free speech and being able to freely express yourself not only in public but also on platforms like Twitter, how far those concepts can reach.
Yeah, so legally speaking, and as far as the platforms themselves, I would be for, as long as you are abiding by the laws of the United States, I would be for, you can be on a platform. Now, it's up for those platforms to decide, but if you're not threatening to murder anybody, you're not yelling fire in a crowded theater, you're not putting out terrorist threats or something of that nature, or doxing people, the real limited things that you can't do within the purview of the laws of the United States, I think you should be able to be on those platforms. I don't know that what word did you say? That I disowned?
Disavowed.
Oh, disavowed. It wasn't disavowed or about. He tweeted, I forget what the exact tweet was that Richard Spencer said. But look, if your basic premise is that the United States should be some sort of white ethno-state, that's just a non-starter for me to be talking about. As I would say, if you think the United States is supposed to be a black ethno-state, or some other thing, then it's just a ridiculous point to be talking about. So I would say I'm not interested in debating that idea. As for Molyneux, it's a great question. I get asked this all the time. The only time in the however many 100 interviews that I've ever done, the only time I ever called somebody for advice was before that interview, because I knew how controversial he is. The race and IQ thing is not something I'm even particularly interested in, and I knew it was something that was sort of beyond my scope in that I don't pay that much attention to it, but I thought this guy's getting a lot of traction, and it's like, let me at least hear what some of these ideas are. And I did call somebody, it's a public person who you probably all know, but I'm just gonna let it be for there. And the one thing that he said to me was, the question you have to repeatedly ask is, why do you care? Let's pretend everything you're saying about race and IQ is true. Why do you care? And I did ask that a couple times, and I really thought that was the right question. And I don't think anyone was radicalized by that. If anything, all these people clipped it and go, oh, the guy's, he's a racist, and Rubin sat there with a racist, and maybe I did. I'm not even saying whether I did or didn't. It's not, in a weird way, it's not even for me to fully decide. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I guess the question, if I can kind of like restate it, was do you think those sorts of conversations should be allowed to be had in the public sphere?
Of course, yeah. Well, anything should be allowed to be talked about as long as it's not breaking what the very specific, we have, I mean, look, you can't yell fire at a crowded theater. I can't incite the mob to go after you for this question, right? If I was like, guys, get him. Okay, we got a problem.
Yeah, the
Can't do
left might,
that.
but I hope you don't.
Yeah, right, I can't do that. It might be fun, but I can't do that. Maybe the first guy. I can't do that. And then beyond that, we have laws related to slander and libel. And that basically is it. And everything else. I'm not for stopping Richard Spencer from speaking. I'm not for stopping Alex Jones from speaking or any of the other people that got banned today. I would have all those people, sunlight's the best disinfectant. And the more that you try to hide their ideas, well then people get curious about them. You know what I mean? That's what happens. You hide these things. And then the real danger in that, by the way, is that you hide these things, and then if these people have some kernel of truth in there somewhere, then everyone starts thinking, oh, everything else they say is true too. And the frogs are making people gay, and the chemtrails are doing all this shit and all that. So I would say, yeah, let people speak and the chips will fall.
So you don't think there's really like a limit to how far it should go as long as it falls within like legal parameters?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Hey Dave, so I guess my question is that with the rise of people like Ben Shapiro, I feel like there's been kind of a backlash from the left in terms of, you know, in the internet or wherever, and they try to delegitimize Ben Shapiro and other people as people just talk fast and sound smarter than they are. So I guess my question is how you might respond to that, and maybe if you can get more debates with intellectually on par people from the left, like I think Kyle Kulinski, and because I think he tells his fans, I watch some of his videos, that, you know, Ben Shapiro isn't really all that people make him out to be, and that he's afraid to debate him. And I think that if you had Ben Shapiro debate Kyle Kulinski or other people, it could kind of put those ideas to rest.
Sure, so in and of itself, like, I'm not against doing that in principle. I think there might be a little bit of blood there between the two of them, and Kyle's gone after me personally a couple times, but in and of itself, I'm not against that. What I would say is if you're worried about the backlash against Shapiro or something, it's like Shapiro's ideas basically are the same ideas that Ronald Reagan had for 8 years. They're basic conservative Republican ideas. The idea that the Overton window has shifted so far that this guy who's an Orthodox Jew is now considered alt-right is completely bananas. So if you want people to pay attention to these ideas, if you got a friend that's a little curious about this but thinks Shapiro's a hater, you know what you do? You play a podcast and then put it on slow-mo first, you do half speed, and then it sounds a little more calm, you know what I mean? And that will do it. Because he's talking fast, I get it, you gotta slow him down. Or have them watch some of the shows with me, where we have dived into, I would say, every single one of the important critical issues of our time, and we've debated them, and we've agreed to disagree, and we leave it there, and we'll do it again. Yeah, that's what I'd say about that.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Dave.
Hi.
So I teach in Milpitas, and I believe that it's my primary role when it comes to discussions about politics to be as unbiased as possible and let the students think. I teach 6th grade. And I've had many experiences with fellow colleagues who tell me a story about something they were talking about in class, and where that's clearly not their priority, and they insert their own political bias. And I've seen it in a lot of curriculum as well that's, you know, developing, where it's a lot of lean to the left. And so my question for you is, if you have an opinion on it, where do you see public education going in the US in the next 10 years?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked this question, because I've been thinking about this a lot. So one of the things that I think does still make me a classical liberal, let's say, instead of a libertarian, is that I do believe in public education. I went to a good elementary school. I went to a blue ribbon high school. I went to State University of New York at Binghamton. It's a great public school, you know, publicly funded school. So I'm a function of publicly funded schools that basically did a pretty good job. That being said, this is happening all over the place. This is happening at the 6th grade level. It's literally happening at like the 2nd grade level when it comes to gender pronouns and all sorts of stuff. I mean, there's no ending to the litany of stories about these things. So this is where I would say I'm for school choice, I'm for vouchers. I would want every parent to be able to do absolutely anything that they could possibly do to give their child the best opportunity. You know, one of the things that, and this is one of the things that the left does all the time, is, oh, there's a problem at the schools. What do? Throw money at it. And it's usually not a money problem. Now, yes, are there some schools that should be funded better and are some way overfunded? Is a school in Beverly Hills going to be funded to the tilt and get the best, you know, the best, they're all lefties, but like the best qualified teachers of all time and all of those things? Yes, and is a school in Harlem, let's say, going to get worse? So if you want to figure out how to move tax dollars around for those sorts of things, then sure. But I would do anything you can do to give the power back to the parent. If it's a failing school, the parent should have every right to get that kid out of that school. We could give vouchers for more charter schools. Those are all things that I think just give back a little power to the parent, give back a little power to the teacher, actually, too. Because you want to teach in a place where, oh, you're trying to be unbiased, well, you're actually going to be rewarded for that instead of punished, where I suspect you're probably, in a weird way, punished, because if the rest of your teachers were all activists, and you're not, then you're sort of the outlier. So, more choice. It's almost everything that almost any political question that you could ask me, I would say more choice. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
I just had a question about how to, I guess, pick your battles, but really reconcile self-preservation with honesty, specifically within positions of power at this university, with the institution being so against you. And to elaborate on that just a little bit, I have had many leadership positions throughout campus, where I'm talking with families and I'm talking to students who don't go here and are really trying to sell the university. And I genuinely love being here, but I definitely have things that I'm supposed to say. And how would you navigate that?
So this is like when kids are coming here to check out the school and you're given a tour or something and they want, well, look, it's a job, right? Like at the end of the day, it's a job. So I would say be as truthful as you can, but if you do things that are not within the purview of the job, well, you might get fired. And that's just a chance that you have to take. Now maybe you start saying things that suddenly get things to be a little bit better. And that's good, and maybe you get fired because of that, and that ends up being good. But at the end of the day, it's a job. You know what I mean? If you work at Burger King and every time somebody comes to the register, you're like, oh, you know, the white man's oppression, you know, well, then they might fire you. You know, like that does happen at Burger King. So you see this today, that they're not doing Happy Meals anymore. They're doing angry meals and like depressed meals. Yeah, I'm literally not kidding. They're actually, yeah, I swear to God. They're putting sad faces on the Happy Meals or something, yeah. But anyway, if it's a job, you got to do what the job requirements are, and then, you know, play around in that as much as you can so that you feel true to yourself. Or if it's just not working, then you got to get another job.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I wanted to kind of preface it by that my philosophy tends to be more that I don't really care what you do, but don't involve legislation, but being somewhere at a place like Santa Clara that's very social justice oriented, and like you said, there are people who are racist, there are people who are homophobic. How would you reconcile being able to focus on equality and social change without necessarily focusing on the legislation and the implementation of that on a legislative level?
Well, is there anything that's going on this campus that is stopping people from doing something by the color of their skin or their gender or their sexuality? Right, so that's really all you can do, and you can keep pushing that idea that you are welcome to come to this school, you can be part of whatever groups you want to be part of, you can learn whatever you want, you can take whatever classes, you can major in whatever you want to major in, et cetera, and we will not discriminate against you. I mean, that's it. I mean, it sounds so obvious, but there's actually nothing else that you can do than show, oh, you guys believe in social justice? Well, everything that we do at this university, if that's the case, is to make people equal. It really, it's like, I know it's like, it's sort of a boring answer in a way, but that's the truth. Yeah, thanks. All right, 4 more, here we go.
So my question is...
4 chicks in a row, by the way. I don't know if you guys noticed that. Where is that guy? Where is that guy? He's not even here! Ah.
All right, so my question is about religion.
Okay.
And I'm interested to know this, since you're a classical liberal. What do you think religion has as a role in society on a sociological level?
Yeah, so I would take what I think is the classical liberal approach on this, which was the founders' approach. that they wanted an absolute separation of church and state, but they talked about God-given rights. Now, without getting into like a whole religious exploration about what God-given rights are, in effect means that rights, you are born with rights. Rights come from something else other than the government's to give. You are born free. The government did not make you free. The government could take away your freedom, it could take away your rights, but it didn't give you those rights. It's an incredibly powerful thought. That's a religious thought. That's why they say they're God-given rights. It's just sort of the best way to write that. It doesn't mean that they believe there was a guy up in the sky who's, you know, worried about who you're having sex with or something like that. It was just that these are God, that there's something before you that is foundational for society. I would say if I've shifted on anything in my life, it's that in the last year or two I have come around to believe that. I really have. I mean, you can't be on tour with Jordan Peterson. This was the debate that Peterson and Sam Harris had many times. That can you derive meaning in a subjective way? And Sam would say yes, that you can derive fact from meaning, that there's an importance to stories, but we can make up stories on our own that could sort of allow flourishing civilizations to evolve. I think that's true on a micro level. So I would say Sam Harris is probably the most moral person I know. I know many atheists, Michael Shermer and Peter Boghossian, I mean, good friends of mine, who are atheists that are absolutely moral, decent, good people. But I would say Jordan has shifted me on the idea that these age-old stories of religion, so say the Judeo-Christian tradition, let's say, that this country is founded upon, that these stories have an eternal value. Why is it that I actually believe that maybe I can beat Google when it comes to this demonetization nonsense? It's because there's a story of David versus Goliath. The little guy can beat the big guy. That's an eternal story. That there are so many biblical stories that have sort of eternal truths, and whether that comes from some primordial maker in the sky, or it was because of thousands of years of evolution when people didn't have phones so they could really think through all the world's problems, almost seems irrelevant to me. But I think the best way it can be framed is that they're God-given rights that we have, and we have to protect them, and the government did not give them to you. They're protecting them. They didn't give them to you. You were born free, and that's a beautiful thing.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Hey Dave, I'd like to say thank you for coming. It's been a great experience. Happy to have you here. So my question for you is also about religion. It's kind of in regards to some of the Easter Sunday bombings in Sri Lanka that happened just a few weeks ago. I was watching some Ben Shapiro and Michael Knowles podcast where Hillary and Barack Obama both tweeted out, "We empathize with everybody who..."
Easter worshippers.
Easter worshippers, yeah. And Ben was kind of talking about how, you know, if somebody had said for any attacks against Muslims, if somebody like Hillary said these Ramadan worshippers, you know, there would be a total fiasco. So I think my question is partly about that, and you know, Ben was also talking about how he feels like anti-Semitism is overlooked in the United States, as Jews are a very widely persecuted group, but it's not something that gets talked about. So I think ultimately my question for you is, should we change the way that we talk about those things and view those types of issues with the persecution of certain religious groups?
Right, so on the first part about Easter worshippers, I mean, it was extremely bizarre. So these bombs go off, killed what, 50 some odd people, right? On Easter Sunday. These are Christian people. Why did so many of the big time lefty politicians and media people say Easter worshippers? That would be like if there was a bomb that went off at a temple on Hanukkah. You would never say Hanukkah worshippers. It just doesn't make sense. If a bomb went off at a mosque, you would say it killed 50 Muslim people, not 50 people celebrating a Muslim holiday, right? So there was some bizarre thing that the left does with language all the time, where they're trying to tip off who they think are good guys and bad guys. And generally, sadly now, they view Christians, particularly white Christians, as bad guys. And that's a seriously unfortunate and misguided way of viewing the world. As far as the rest of it, I mean, I actually, look, you can look at all you can just look at stats, right? Facts don't care about your feelings. You can just look at stats. And there are more hate crimes. For the last 50 years, it's always Jews by far at the top. I don't think there's any more, I truly don't believe this. I do not believe there's more anti-Semitism in the United States now than there was 20 years ago. I think we hear about things in a different way. I think right now there's something seriously perverse happening in the Democratic Party, usually masked in something about Israel, but I think Ilhan Omar is what a true anti-Semite is. That cartoon in the New York Times the other day, that's right out of Der Stürmer in Germany in 1943. I mean, that is exactly what they did. It's exactly what they did. So there's some perverse, weird thing coming out of the left. And that's not to say there isn't any, there aren't the Richard Spencers and say more white ethno-state people on the right, but those people have no power. They have certainly no institutional or political power, and I don't believe Donald Trump is one of them. So I would say the best thing we can do, again, is like, make sure we have equal laws for all people, and then ultimately pray however you want to pray, or don't pray if you don't want to pray, and that's all you can do in a free society.
Thank you.
Thanks.
My question is based on the idea that diversity of thought is more important than diversity of identity and immutable characteristics. How do you think this should affect the current state of college admissions and affirmative action more specifically?
Yeah, well, I don't believe in affirmative action, period, without question. So you're Asian, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Do you mind if I ask?
Chinese.
What? You're Chinese, okay. So you would be discriminated against if you were applying to Harvard. Now, I'm going to guess that, what generation are you, immigrant?
Third.
Third generation, so your grandparents moved here. Yeah. Okay, your grandparents moved here. I'm going to guess they didn't have a lot when they moved here. I'm going to guess that they worked really hard. And I'm going to guess that your parents probably had more than they had.
Yes.
And I'm going to guess that you probably had more than your parents had.
Definitely.
Yeah. Now, you're supposed to be punished for that? Or is that the American dream? So the idea that we're going to go, wait a minute. I mean, they're the ones, this is the irony of the left, they're the ones that are trying to institutionalize racism. Why should you, by the color of your skin, by where your grandparents came from, why should you be discriminated against, except we know that Harvard was actually doing that. So I'm 100% against affirmative action. I wouldn't be for, look, if I was getting on a plane, do you want the best pilot, period, regardless of his skin color or his sexuality, or you'd be like, I want the third best pilot, preferably someone who's bisexual. I mean, but that really is the truth. There's a reason that that's funny. It's because it's true. They're making us think things that make no sense. If you had a heart attack, picture your dad, he has a heart attack tomorrow. Do you want him to have the best doctor, or do you want him to have the 5th best doctor because somebody came in because of whatever it is, whatever their perceived depression is? So I'm completely against it, and the people that are pushing it are actually trying, because it's not just, it sounds nice, well, we'd like a more diverse school, so we're gonna have less Asians. I mean, that doesn't sound nice to me, but I can see within the scope of what they would say, that sounds nice. But what you're doing is you're saying we're gonna institutionalize prejudice against some people. And I just simply don't believe in that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hi Dave, thank you for coming.
It's the big finish, man. You feeling good?
I'm feeling good.
All right.
I've seen your show more than twice.
Okay. Thank you.
I want to ask you a two-part question, and it's interrelated. So I mostly grew up here in the Bay, and I'm a little older than not college age anymore, but when we were growing up, it was kind of, a point of pride to think differently and to be different, and that was kind of the American idea. Is if you think independently, it's good. Like, we respect that. You have a space to do that. And now basically the Bay functions as like a political cult. I mean, job security is at risk. You're ostracized. It's very, very dark, and it's very intensely malicious, the way that the groupthink is functioning right now here. And Jordan Peterson made a point that is very, very accurate, that if we cannot, that we need people with different, like you were saying, we need people with different perspectives. And if we cannot communicate between people who are conservative, people who are liberal, people with different perspectives, and there's disagreements, all we have is violence. That's the only thing that we have. The first half of the question, it seems pretty bad, and it seems like, okay, let's say we have some economic stability with Trump in 2020. What's after that? Like, there's these, I'm so happy to see all these people in this room, but generally speaking, the university campus isn't here. And I don't mean physically here, I mean like intellectually they're not having this conversation. Is there a way back? And the second part relates to, I didn't know he was gonna ask that question, but the second part relates to kind of a historical trend throughout humankind. And that's, a couple days ago this weekend, 6 months after Pittsburgh, we had the San Diego attack. And people don't understand this deeply the way you might, or the way a lot of us do with generational trauma, et cetera, et cetera. The anti-Semitism isn't new, like you were saying, but it's made with the mainstreaming of anti-Semitism on the left, and with the empowering of the far right by the left, whose big thing is anti-Semitism, of course. Is there a future not just and look, the precedent for a society that is on the brink of that is deteriorating, that is going down, is when they start attacking its Jews. There's a historical precedent, and every country you look at that starts attacking its Jews, that's like, okay, now.
Okay, so I got it. So you're right.
Is there a turn back from this and specifically from?
So I'll do the first part first, which is so how do we get back from this, just generally politically speaking? So what I think could happen, and what my hope is that let's Trump wins re-election for a second. And Trump wins re-election because the left just went completely batty, because look what they did. By putting Biden up there, Biden who didn't run, last time against Trump, that's the last chance for the decent Democrats. I'm no huge Joe Biden fan, but like, he basically is something sort of like an old school liberal who's now gonna try to get out. He's gonna have to keep getting more woke and more lefty, right, to prove it, because really he's just a straight white old heterosexual Catholic guy, and they're gonna make him pay for that. But really in his mind, and the establishment's mind, they were like, holy cow, between Bernie and Kamala Harris and Cory Booker and Beto and the rest of them, these guys have gone so bananas, we better find somebody, or really we're gonna get demolished. So I would say, going on the assumption that Trump wins, which is sort of where I see the world at the moment, that we don't need the outrage forever. There's an exhaustion of the outrage. You can feel it here. I feel it at every event that I go to. We've outsourced too much of the conversation to crazy people. There's a lot of studies saying that even the postmodernists and a lot of this lefty stuff, it's really only about 8 to 10% of the population, but they just yell a lot and they're really involved in the media. So we're just getting hit with it every day, which is why every time you open up Twitter, there's some other story about something related to a bathroom or a gender pronoun or some of this stuff. I would say that we can't run on outrage forever. So if you want silver lining, if we can end this with some silver lining, the silver lining is that I suspect that if Trump won again, that there would be an empowerment on the right where they would go, whoa, we actually kind of made it through the worst of this, and that after Trump, and this is a little bit doing a little sci-fi here, but like that basically after Trump, that I think we could get back to some more decent politicians that are about ideas. That Trump was basically there's a million analogies you can use. Seb Gorka says that Trump was basically the icebreaker, that he just had to do all of the dirty shit to just get in, because the Republicans tried it the other way. They tried it with John McCain, you may disagree with his politics, but he was a decent human being. They tried it with Mitt Romney, who was a decent human being. And Trump was like, you know what, I'm just gonna do what I have to do, because it's not that I just have to fight the left and the Democratic nominee, I also have to fight the media, so I'm gonna do it in a crazy way. And what I think could happen after is that enough people will be like, holy cow, we got through it, the media is completely changing, social media, all of these things, and that we will return to something that is a little more idea-based. Maybe Shapiro runs, maybe there's, just something that is something else. So I would say that on that, and then on the part about anti-Semitism, yeah, I mean, Jews are the canary in the coal mine. When it starts going bad for Jews, it usually starts going bad for a whole country. And I don't think, I'll just repeat what I said, I don't think there is a worse problem with anti-Semitism now. I don't think in America that people hate each other. I don't believe it. There is a loud minority of crazy people that are trying to divide us. And don't give them the power to do it. It's hard not to do, it's hard, look, we also live in a time where the second something happens somewhere, you could tweet about it. We often find out that a lot of these things are hoaxes related to all sorts, from Jussie Smollett to a gajillion other things. So it's like, just try not to be outraged all the time. And I just did an event for 2 hours with a bunch of conservatives. Was there anyone racist here? Was anyone homophobic here? And it's just not true. And that's what I'm saying. That's all they got. And if we can be a little bit better than them, I think the future is bright. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how you end the show. Thank you guys very much. I really appreciate it. Give it up for